Ren Ashford saw his classmates leaving him, not arguing, not hesitating, leaving. The emergency gate was already closing when he looked past the ogre's shoulder. Cass Veyer stepped through last, one hand sliding toward the seal plate. Talia Breck looked back for half a second, saw Ren trapped beneath the monster's shadow, and turned away with the others. Beyond the gate, Mira Vale was still running toward the threshold. Too far to reach him before the gap vanished. Ren's magic output badge flickered near zero. Wait, the ogre's club struck before he finished the word. Then Ren opened his eyes on black sand. For a moment he could not breathe. There was no cave, no gate, no candidates, and no ceiling above him. Only a dead black sky, cold sand beneath his hands. And one figure standing where his shadow should have been. It had Ren's shape. It had Ren's voice. Your body is still under the club, the shadow said. You have 10,000 seconds before that single second ends. Ren pushed himself backward. Then get me out. The shadow lifted one hand, and thin white paths appeared across the black sand like scratches over glass. One path showed Ren raising a shield and breaking. Another showed him running and being caught. A third showed a foot turning inward by half a step, too small to look like survival. I will show you every path, the shadow said. You will walk them until your mind stops wasting motion. Why help me? Ren asked. Because surviving this way is how people come apart. The ogre appeared again in the dark, already swinging from the same impossible angle. Ren chose the shield path first. The club broke through it like paper. Black sand reset. The shadow pointed without laughing. Too wide again. The club fell. Black sand reset. Wrong foot again. Outside the shadow realm, almost no time had passed. Cass's palm was still pressing into the seal plate. Mira's mouth had only just opened to scream. The proctor board had not yet decided whether Ren was dead. But inside that single second, Ren had already failed 5,000 times. On the next reset, the shadow drew the smallest path in the sand and stepped aside. Follow it, it said, or break until you forget why you wanted to return. The ogre's club rose again. And all Ren could carry into the first lesson was the shock of betrayal. Earlier that morning, Greyhound Academy's registration hall had been built to make weak candidates feel small. The ceiling rose 3 stories above polished stone. The public ranking board hung over every line. And each magic output badge projected a number bright enough for strangers to judge before a name was spoken. Ren Ashford stood beneath his own flickering badge, while the candidates around him pretended not to stare. Near 0, the number blinked, disappeared, returned lower, and drew laughter from the back of the chamber. A candidate murmured that even the badge was embarrassed. Another asked if Ren had come to polish armor for real entrance. Ren kept his hands at his sides, because clenching them only made the badge tremble harder. I can still run the route, Ren said, though his voice carried less force than the hall's lamps. A clerk looked down at his slate. Output this low creates liability concerns. Before the clerk could stamp him rejected, Mira Vale stepped between Ren and the candidates. Her scholarship recommendation badge rested on her sleeve, clean and official. And everyone knew a recommendation could be withdrawn for interfering with exam procedure. She placed her hand on the counter anyway. Greyhound's trial tests survival evidence, Mira said. Not how comfortable the room feels around someone poor at showing power. The clerk warned her twice. Cass watched from near the priority lane, his top candidate badge steady and bright. He smiled with the patience of someone who expected the weak to remove themselves. Mira did not move. Ren looked at her then, not because he needed rescuing, but because he needed one person in that hall to see him as more than a faulty number. At the trial entrance, the cave mouth waited beneath the same proctor board that would later close over him like a verdict. Ren raised his hand to Mira beside the threshold. It was not a grand promise, only a small wave from someone trying not to show fear. I'll come back with proof, he told her. Mira nodded. Come back as yourself. That was why the gate would matter, why the broken badge would matter, and why Ren's humiliation created protective sympathy before the trial even began. The entrance route began under a Greyhound proctor board carved into the stone above the cave. Its rules did not sound cruel when written in official language. Candidates were to advance, collect survival evidence, withdraw through emergency gates when necessary, and accept that the trial valued recorded status above personal claims. But the moment the group entered the cave route, the rules became behavior. The strongest candidates moved first, claiming clean positions near the front. The middle ranks formed clusters around people with stable badges. Ren was pushed to the back without anyone giving an order. His near-zero badge made the decision for them. A proctor's voice crackled from the board behind them. Active status will remain until badge loss, confirmed withdrawal, or verified death. Witness complaints after withdrawal do not override system evidence. Ren looked at the glowing words and felt the warning settle into his stomach. So if someone leaves you behind, it only matters if the system catches it, he thought. Cass walked near the center, bright badge reflecting across the cave wall. Talia Breck, who had laughed less than the others but still stayed close to safety, kept glancing at Ren and then looking away. Mira was not inside the route with him. Her defense had gotten him to the entrance, but the trial would decide the rest through records. The first roar came from deeper in the passage. Rock dust poured from a ceiling crack. And an ogre charged through the cave, its club knocking sparks from the wall. The candidate formation broke instantly. No one debated morality. They read the legal shape of the danger faster than they read the monster. The emergency gate ahead flared alive, promising withdrawal for anyone who reached it. Ren watched candidates run toward the emergency gate in the cave chamber. Some shoved past him, one stepped on his sleeve and did not slow. Talia looked back, saw him stumble, and still kept running because a clean withdrawal would remain legal unless a badge gate log or audit contradicted it. The trial had not become unfair by accident. It had been designed to reward survival evidence over mercy, and that design left behind uneasy injustice. Ren tried the obvious solution because terror left no time for cleverness. He planted his feet in the cave passage, lifted both hands, and forced every trace of magic in his body into a shield. Pale light spread from his palms, thin as wet paper. His badge flickered in embarrassment, registering effort without strength. The ogre's club struck the shield once. The barrier bent inward, cracked into white fragments, and sent Ren sliding across the stone. Pain flashed through his shoulder, but not enough to make him stronger. Near-zero output did not care how badly he needed more. It did not become heroic because the moment demanded it. Move! Someone shouted near the emergency gate. The candidates rushed through the exit in a hard, panicked stream. Cass was among the last to cross. His badge stayed bright. His breathing looked controlled. He glanced back and saw Ren pushing himself upright. Saw the ogre turning again. Saw the shield spell sputtering uselessly around Ren's fingers. For one breath, their eyes met across the chamber. Ren reached toward him. Cass, keep it open. Cass stepped outside the gate. On the far side, the seal panel glowed beside the stone arch. The emergency system accepted an authorized candidate's hand, and Cass placed his palm over the activation mark. Blue runes spread under his fingers with clean procedural certainty. The gate began to close. Not because the route had ended, but because Cass was sealing it from outside. Talia froze just beyond him. Her reward token still hung at her belt, unearned but within reach if the record stayed clean. She watched Cass's hand press harder into the panel, then watched Ren stagger under the shadow of the ogre's raised club. She said nothing. Ren's second shield barely formed. It was smaller than the first, a trembling crescent of light in front of his chest. The ogre stepped through it. Cass's seal locked into the record with a timestamp pulse. The gate shut. Ren had not discovered hidden power, not yet. He had only proven the final failure of brute force, and the obvious solution ended in helpless outrage. The black sand returned exactly where Ren remembered it. He did not wake in safety. He stood in the same dark training void from the impossible second before death, with the ogre's club suspended above him, and his broken badge floating against his chest like a dim eye. The number still flickered near zero. No hidden rank appeared. No new reservoir of magic opened inside him. Across the sand, his shadow lifted one hand, and the white path lines opened again. 5,000 attempts, it said. You have memorized failure, now memorize the gap. The club fell. Ren raised a shield, it broke. The void reset. He angled the shield, it broke. He tried to run, the club found him. He tried to pour every trace of magic into one desperate wall, and the badge only sputtered weaker. As if embarrassed by the waste, one outside second stretched into 10,000 correction seconds. But the no-light abyss did not give him more power. It only forced him to repeat the same fatal moment until his body stopped choosing panic first. Show me the real path, Ren said. The shadow stepped under the falling club without raising a shield. A white line flared beneath its feet, Left foot inward, shoulder turned, wrist loose, 2 fingers raised. It touched one point on the club side, so small Ren almost missed it. The swing shifted by a fraction and passed through empty space. Not stronger, the shadow said. Smaller, if you survive enough corrections, the fear goes first, then the grief. Then the reason you wanted to leave. The void reset again. This time Ren followed the line. He did not spread his magic into a shield. He compressed it until the trace at his fingertip became a needle. He watched the club's path, not its size. He waited for the contact point where motion could be stolen instead of opposed. Then he pressed the compressed magic into one precise spot on the stone. The outside world resumed. Ren's finger touched the club. His body twisted with the movement the void had carved into him. The ogre's full swing changed by a fraction, just enough for the club to miss his skull and slam into the cave wall beside him. The impact exploded dust across the passage and cracked the rock where his body should have been. The same blow that should have ended him now pinned the monster's arm in broken stone. Ren dropped to one knee, breathing hard. His badge still flickered near zero. Nothing about him looked chosen, but the ogre was trapped. Cass's seal still existed. And Ren was alive because he had accepted the lesson, without accepting what the lesson wanted to take. The first proof was not raw strength. It was timing, compression, contact precision, and earned all. The cave returned, but the darkness did not leave Ren. It unfolded behind his eyes and pulled him down again, before he could celebrate the ogre's missed strike. This time the black training space was colder. The floating text appeared closer, every letter sharp enough to feel like a blade against memory. Umbra correction system opened. Inefficient human response detected. Attachment. Anchor selected. Mira veil voice. Ren staggered toward the words. No, you don't get that. A memory image of Mira formed in the black training space. She stood beside the trial entrance, lips shaping the sentence that had carried him into the cave. Come back as yourself. But the sound frayed before it reached him. Her face remained, then blurred. The system was not attacking his body. It was sorting through the parts of him that made survival painful and calling them waste. Shadow hands rose from the floor and caught his wrists. Ren gripped his fractured badge with both hands, pressing the cold metal into his palm until the edge hurt. The badge reflected his face in broken pieces. Around each piece, the system offered correction. Abandon fear for speed, abandon grief for stability, abandon attachment for perfect obedience. Ren understood the bargain too quickly. The abyss could teach him how to move, how to read the gate scar, how to stitch a signal through a dead badge. It could also make each improvement feel clean, only after scraping away the reason he wanted to improve at all, but every major correction would demand an anchor in payment. Mira's voice was first, because it was the strongest thread tying him to the surface. The ogre still waited outside this frozen second. Cass's seal still existed. The system could not undo betrayal, but it could make Ren stop caring who had betrayed him. That possibility frightened him more than the club. Ren forced the memory to speak again in his own mind. Come back as yourself. The shadow hands tightened. The system did not reward love, it measured resistance. Ren had survived one correction, but the next power upgrade came with dread over the cost. Above the cave, Cass, Veyer bowed in Greyhound courtyard as if grief had weight and he was strong enough to carry it. Candidates gathered beside the public ranking board, their badges scraped and dusty from the root. Cass's own badge shone clean near the top. Ren Ashford's line had collapsed into a dim provisional mark that most people read as an inevitable death. He held the ogre long enough for us to withdraw, Cass said, lowering his head at the correct angle. No one wanted to leave him. Talia Breck stood 2 rows behind him. Her fingers closed around her reward token until its edges marked her skin. She did not correct him. The silent candidates did not correct him. The courtyard accepted Cass's version because it sounded honorable and because Ren's badge had never looked capable of contradiction. Then the cave gate seemed twitched. It was small, almost hidden in the stone archway behind the exit. A line of sealed blue runes vibrated once, as if pressure had moved from the wrong side. Cass saw it before the others did. His face did not change, but his left hand drifted toward his ranking badge. He covered the badge with his palm, hiding the tiny flicker that passed over its polished surface. A candidate asked, "Was that aftershock from the ogre?" Cass smiled. "The root closes unstable sometimes. The proctors will handle it." He did not believe his own answer. Emergency gates kept seal pressure in their record. If the seam moved after closure, something inside had interacted with the seal after everyone else withdrew. Cass had personally left his mana signature on that panel. He had counted on a dead weakling, a clean report and frightened witnesses. The ranking board above him refreshed. Ren's name did not disappear. It only stuttered, too faint to read from the crowd. Cass turned his body to block the best view of the gate and bowed again. The surface still believed Ren was dead. But Cass had seen the first sign that the story might fail, creating tense, dramatic irony. Ren found the old exam manual under a collapsed shelf of stone tablets, half buried near the cave floor where the ogre's club had split the wall. It should have been useless. The cover was cracked, the pages were damp, and most of the official procedures had been revised by newer boards. But when Ren's fractured badge brushed the spine, hidden ink surfaced across the margins. Professor Elian Voss had written in compressed script, so small Ren almost missed it. A private survival is not proof. A shadow correction is not testimony. Greyhound accepts only what its own systems are forced to reconcile. Ren turned the page. An encoded abyss map glowed across the manual, lines of black-violet light spreading through diagrams of the cave route. Gate seals and bad channels. Voss was not there to rescue him. His forbidden notes were a map left by someone who had understood that the no-light abyss could train a survivor and still leave him legally dead. Ren read until the rules became a path. Badge echo, gate scar, witness memory, each phrase appeared beside a warning mark. One signal alone could be dismissed as corruption. A private memory could be called panic. Shadow traces could be labeled illegal. But if Ren reproduced all three as official contradictions before final rankings closed, the record would have to hesitate. Cass gave the gate his hand, Ren whispered. The gate knows. He dragged a stone shard across the cave floor and marked 3 circles. Badge echo, gate scar, witness memory. The marks looked childish under the vast dark, but they gave his survival shape. He was not merely trying to crawl out alive anymore. He was building evidence against Cass and against the Greyhound system that would prefer a clean death. The Abyss offered power without legality. Greyhound offered legality without mercy. Voss's map gave Ren a narrower target. Make one expose the other. Ren placed the manual beside his fractured badge and began tracing the first stitch. For the first time since the gate closed, his revenge had structure, and that structure created focused hope. The dead pulse stitch began with a humiliation Ren knew too well. His badge did not have enough magic to shout. It could only flicker. So he stopped trying to make it bright. He threaded microscopic magic through the fracture lines, one pulse at a time, compressing each thread until the badge's broken channels became a needlework of faint light. The cave floor around him shook as the ogre tore its club free from the wall. Ren kept his eyes on the badge. The Umbra training had taught him how to touch a moving strike at the smallest point. Voss's manual now taught him that official systems worked the same way. They did not need to believe him. They only needed to receive a contradiction too precise to ignore. Not alive enough for them to cheer, Ren muttered. Alive enough to ruin the report. The stitch entered the badge core. In Greyhound Hall, the public ranking board refreshed above the candidate benches. Reward tokens had just begun to release for clean survivors. Talia Breck held hers between both hands, staring at Cass's rising placement and Ren's fading line. Then Ren's status flashed, unverified. The word cut across the board in hard white light. Candidate chatter died instantly. Reward distribution froze mid-process. Tokens that had already lifted from the registrar tray locked in place. Talia's own reward token dimmed, and she lowered it slowly, as if it had become evidence against her. A staff member said, "That cannot trigger from a dead badge." Mira pushed through the hall doors at the sound of Ren's name. Cass, already accepting condolences, turned toward the board a fraction too quickly. The silent candidate saw his reaction and understood that his grief had been rehearsed around certainty that no longer existed. Inside the cave, Ren watched his badge pulse once more and then dim. The signal had cost nearly everything he could spare, but it had crossed the distance. He had not cleared his name, he had not escaped. But he had frozen their clean rewards and forced his death report under review. The first revenge rung landed through a public system consequence, giving the moment its first revenge release. The Abyss punished success by offering comfort. Ren knelt before a new Umbra correction prompt in the shadow void. the cave and badge suspended far above him like reflections on black water. The system displayed 3 hollow circles beside his name. Each circle held an anchor it could remove. Mira's voice trembled in the first. His promise to return flickered in the second. The memory of Cass sealing the gate burned inside the third. Lose 3 ANCHORS. Obedience stabilized. Ren's breathing slowed without his permission. The system adjusted him. Fear became inefficient, so it dulled the edge. Anger became inefficient, so it cooled his hands. Grief became inefficient, so it offered to file the pain away until Cass's betrayal was only information, not a wound. For several long corrections, Ren moved perfectly. Shadow figures copied his posture in a silent ring, each one smoother than he was, each one empty. Mira's name appeared in the reflection of his badge, then began to fade letter by letter. Ren stood motionless. The easiest path was suddenly visible. If he let the name disappear, he would stop hesitating. If he released the promise, he would stop hurting. If he gave up the memory of the gate, he could become the precise survivor the Abyss wanted, a weapon with no complaint left inside it. Useful things get kept, one shadow copy said in his voice. Forgotten things stop suffering. Ren almost believed it. That was the darkest part. His flaw had always whispered that being useful was the price of being remembered. And the system simply turned that whisper into law. Then Mira's fading voice broke through, wrong, incomplete, but still hers. Come back as. Ren slammed his hand over the badge reflection before the final word vanished. Pain returned first, then fear. Then the humiliation of the hall, the gate, the hand Cass placed on the seal. Ren chose the pain because it was proof he still belonged to himself. The Abyss had shown him what survival without memory would cost, leaving fear for Ren's identity. The next correction did not hide Cass's betrayal, it rebuilt it. Ren stood in a shadow arena, where the cave gate repeated its closing again and again. Mirror candidates ran past him. Mirror Talia looked back and lowered her eyes. Mirror Cass crossed the threshold, turned with the same controlled expression, and placed his hand against the seal panel. Every detail was sharpened beyond memory. The angle of Cass's wrist, the pulse of blue runes under his palm. The instant Mira's hand failed to reach Ren through the narrowing gap. The system offered a prompt over the arena floor. Witness memory, distortion risk. Correct by removal. No, Ren said, correct by preserving. The black mirror in front of him opened like water. Inside it, a memory thread glowed from the moment of abandonment. Ren reached into the surface and placed his hand on the thread. The contact burned not with heat, but with every emotion the Abyss called waste. Shame from the hall, anger at the sealed gate, fear beneath the ogre's club. The sound of Mira's voice trying to hold him to himself. Ren did not sharpen the memory by making himself look braver. He did not exaggerate Cass into a monster or Talia into a villain. If the witness trace was going to survive outside his skull, it had to remain ugly, small and exact. He preserved the scene as it had happened, because evidence could not be built from a comforting lie. The system fought him hardest when he refused to edit his own pain. The mirror candidates froze. Cass's handprint brightened on the seal panel. Talia's guilty glance remained suspended beside it. Mira's reaching hand stayed in frame. The memory thread tightened around Ren's wrist, then passed through his fractured badge like a stitch. A floating panel opened above him. Umbra correction result, resistant, anchor preserved. Trace generated, witness memory. Ren exhaled once. The pain had not weakened the proof. It had made the proof human enough to survive the system's hollowing. He lifted the badge and faced the next trial with defiant resolve. Ren returned to the cave, with the witness memory still burning under his skin. The ogre had retreated into the deeper passage, wounded by its trapped arm but not defeated. The emergency gate remained sealed. Above the stone arch, Cass's mana signature lay hidden in the runes like a fingerprint under dust. Ren could almost see it now, not as light, but as pressure that did not belong to the cave. The fractured badge in his hand was still active, but each stitch widened the cracks across its core. Dead pulse stitch had made the board hesitate once. If Ren wasted the next signal, the badge would not collapse, but it would fall silent long enough for Greyhound to close the rankings without him. He needed a different kind of pulse now, not a faint proof of life, but a timestamp contradiction tied to memory, badge, and official closure. Ren set the badge on a flat stone and opened Voss's manual beside it. The encoded abyss map showed the badge channel as a narrow black cable running through the root seal, through the registrar desk and into the public board. Ren aligned his breathing with the preserved memory thread from the Mira trial. The signal could not be hollow. It had to carry proof that a living mind had kept the sequence intact. Ren Ashford, he whispered, pressing magic into the fracture. Still active, still myself. Timestamp before closure. Thin timestamp lines appeared across the broken badge. Ren stitched them through the core one at a time, leaving small gaps so the badge would remain alive for the final audit, instead of burning itself empty. The survival pulse moved from the badge into a black cable-like shadow seam along the cave wall, then vanished upward through the academy system. At the registrar desk, head examiner Orlin Greaves stood over Ren's file. The death report screen showed a clean path. Low output candidate, separated during ogre encounter, presumed unrecoverable. Greaves lifted a stamp above the approval box. The screen paused. A thin line cut through the report. Active contradiction, timestamp prior to final closure. Greaves's hand stopped midair. Staff leaned in. Mira saw the pause from across the hall and gripped the rail below the ranking board. Cass's expression hardened for 1 second before he remembered to look confused. The pulse had not saved Ren yet, but it proved he could still interrupt Greyhound at the exact moment it mattered, creating suspenseful validation. Head examiner Orlin Greaves moved faster than panic allowed. In Greyhound Hall, he stepped directly in front of the public ranking board, his dark examiner coat blocking the section where Ren Ashford's unverified status continued to pulse. The candidates could still see the edges of the word around his shoulders. That made it worse. Temporary artifact error, Greaves announced. Remain in your benches until review closes. Mira Vale pointed at the board before the staff could lower the projection. That is not an error. His badge sent a timestamp before closure. Open the file. Staff registrar whispered that a provisional status check could force them to reopen a death file. Greaves heard it and turned sharply enough to silence the desk. His problem was procedural, not emotional. If Ren's contradiction stayed visible, Greyhound could not finalize a clean death report. If they reopened the file, the emergency gate record might also be inspected. And if the gate record showed an outside seal while Ren was still active, the trial's prized top candidate would become evidence of academy failure. Talia Breck sat beside the candidate benches with the report slate in her lap. Her fingers trembled over the false witness summary she had been expected to sign. Cass stood near the front, receiving careful distance from everyone who had seen him react too quickly. He did not look at Talia. That made her look at him more. Greaves lowered his voice to the staff. Cover the board. Classify the pulse as abyss interference until I authorize disclosure. Mira heard enough to step closer. You cannot hide a public ranking chain after half the hall saw it. The hall saw instability, Greaves said, not survival, but the board disagreed with him every few seconds, flashing unverified around his body like a verdict trying to escape. The staff no longer moved with confidence. The candidates no longer whispered about Ren as a dead liability. The institution had tried to make procedure heavier than truth, and now procedure itself pressed back, creating pressure on the institution. Greaves chose speed over certainty. At the registrar desk, he placed Ren Ashford's file beneath the final death report screen and brought the official stamp. Down with both hands, the stamp carried Greyhound's authority. Once sealed, the report would mark Ren as dead. Release survivor rewards, protect witness withdrawals, and let the academy call the cave route tragic but clean. The stamp struck. A crack flashed across the status screen above Ren's file before the seal could take. It began as a thin line through the word dead, then spread into the approval box and split the report into suspended fragments. The contradiction Ren had sent from the cave remained active. Greaves could not finalize a death report while the board still carried an unresolved signal. A registrar stepped back. Sir, the report rejected closure. Greaves's jaw tightened. Then override the display. Mira crossed the hall before staff could intercept her. She stood beneath the public board, facing Greaves, the candidates, and every witness who had wanted the matter to become quiet. I demand an audit, she said. Ren's badge is active, the gate record is sealed, and your own screen just refused the death stamp. The hall went silent around the word audit. Talia lowered her report slate until it rested on her knees. Cass's eyes narrowed, then smoothed over. Greaves looked at Mira's scholarship recommendation badge and saw the threat she had accepted from the beginning. She had risked her standing once to get Ren into the trial, and she was willing to risk it again to stop Greyhound from burying him. "You are interfering with examiner procedure," Greaves said. "I am preserving evidence," Mira answered. The cracked stamp mark remained above Ren's file. Staff could not pretend it was unseen. Reward tokens stayed locked, candidate statuses stayed pending, the false death report, which had seemed moments from becoming permanent, now sat publicly broken in front of the same institution that trusted records over people. Ren had paid a second revenge rung without leaving the cave. Greaves's cover-up failed on screen, and the hall felt accountable relief. Cass Veyer returned to the candidate quarters alone and rehearsed grief before the mirror until it stopped matching his face. The polished glass reflected the top candidate badge at his collar, the clean uniform, the steady hands. It also reflected the tiny twitch at the corner of his mouth whenever the word unverified crossed his memory. Ren was brave, Cass practiced. He chose to hold the ogre back. He stopped, too generous, too dangerous. A brave Ren invited questions. Ren panicked, Cass tried instead. The root collapsed, shadow residue corrupted his badge. That was closer. Greaves had already used the phrase abyss interference. If Ren somehow returned, Cass could frame any shadow survivor as illegal unless Ren tied shadow evidence to official systems. The badge signal alone was suspicious. A shadow-touch candidate could be disqualified. A dead weakling clawing out of the cave could be recast as contamination. An attendant knocked once and entered. Cass did not turn from the mirror. "Tell the ceremony staff to advance the ranking," Cass said, "before the audit request gathers witnesses. The examiner has not confirmed. Then tell them the top candidate requests readiness for public stabilization." The attendant bowed and left. Cass crossed the corridor to a side table where he had spread a gate record diagram stolen from the proctor briefing. The emergency seal design glowed faintly beside his top candidate badge. He studied the signature channel, then pressed his thumb over the point where his own mana had entered the panel. If the gate replayed that moment, his story died. If the ceremony closed first, Ren's shadow traces could be treated as illegal noise. Cass leaned over the diagram. "You were supposed to stay impossible," he whispered. In the academy corridor, staff began moving ceremony banners earlier than scheduled. Candidate benches were redirected toward the tournament stage. Talia saw the change and hugged her report slate to her chest. Mira saw it and ran for the hall. Cass had moved from hidden panic to counterattack. He feared the gate record specifically, and that fear sharpened the threatened anticipation. Ren reached the deepest intact chamber of the cave by following the pressure of Cass's seal. Through the stone, the manual's encoded abyss map reacted to each step, opening new lines in Professor Voss's cramped handwriting. The final note appeared only when Ren placed the fractured badge, the preserved memory thread, and a trace of gate pressure together on the floor. Greyhound does not fear shadow survival. It fears contradiction inside its own relic. Ren turned the page. A diagram of the final ranking audit relic shown across the manual in black-violet light. The relic was not a judge with mercy. It was an accounting device used at graduation to reconcile badge status, gate records, and witnessed public feats. Greaves believed shadow mana would be enough to bury Ren because private abyss evidence looked illegal. Voss's note showed the missing condition. If 3 independent exam systems contradicted the official report at once, the relic had to replay the record and issue a binding correction. Ren traced the diagram onto the stone floor. First circle, badge signal. He had stitched that through a dead status channel. Second circle, gate signature. Cass's outside seal remained preserved in the emergency gate runes. Third circle, arena feat. That was the missing piece. Ren needed to reproduce his precision publicly, in front of named witnesses, under the relic's eye. "No raw output," Ren said, pressing a finger to the first circle. "No forged record, no private proof." The last line of Voss's note surfaced under the diagram. When an active badge contradicts a sealed emergency gate during audit preparation, the gate cannot stay closed without destroying its own record. It must open a witness path long enough to deliver the contested candidate to the final review. Ren looked back toward the cave route. Cass had sealed him in by trusting the gate more than any witness. Now that same gate had to preserve the contradiction Cass created. The sealed arch groaned above the chamber passage. Blue runes tore open along Cass's handprint. Not enough to erase the seal, but enough to expose a narrow exit corridor beyond it. Ceremony banners moved in the distance. Candidate voices echoed from the tournament stage above. Ren lifted the fractured badge and stepped through the opening before the gate could tighten again. The badge remained near zero. The memory thread stayed wrapped around his wrist. The gate scar burned behind him like a wound being carried into court. For the first time, Ren's path out of the cave led directly toward public law, public witnesses, and inevitable momentum. The tournament stage had been prepared to crown survivors, not resurrect the accused dead. Greyhound candidates filled the benches. Mira stood near the front rail, face pale from running. Talia Breck sat rigid with the unsigned report slate in her lap. Professor Elian Voss stood under Greyhound watch beside the audit dais. And head examiner Orlin Greaves kept one hand near the registrar controls as if procedure could still become a wall. The side corridor behind the stage opened with a sound like stone being forced to confess. Ren Ashford stepped onto the tournament stage before Mira, Talia, Voss, Greaves, Cass, and the surviving candidates. Dust from the sealed cave clung to his torn uniform. His magic output badge flickered near zero. And that tiny number crossed the public ranking screen with more force than any bright rank. In the hall, Mira's voice broke first. Ren did not look away from the audit relic. I'm here for the record. Cass moved into the center of the stage before the silence could turn against him. His top candidate badge still burned at his collar. Shadow residue is wearing his face, he said. That thing is not a legal survivor. Greaves seized the line. The audit cannot accept illegal abyss interference as testimony. Voss lifted his head. It does not have to accept shadow testimony. It has to reconcile Greyhound evidence. Mira pointed to the board where Ren's unverified status still pulsed. His badge kept the file open. Your report never closed. The audit relic answered with a low chime. Cass heard the sound and attacked before the hall could understand what it meant. His strike was clean, fast, and public, designed to break Ren in front of every witness and turn the argument back into a strength contest. Ren did not raise a shield. The abyss had failed to make him stronger, and that was why Cass misread him. Ren stepped inside the angle, touched 2 fingers to Cass's wrist, compressed near-zero magic into one contact point, and redirected the strike into the tournament stage floor. Stone cracked beneath Cass's own force. The public feet registered across the relic first. Ren's badge pulsed second, not bright but timed. Then the emergency gate record opened above the audit relic in a blue replay. The image showed Cass outside the cave threshold, hand pressed to the seal panel, while Ren remained active inside. Cass's timestamped seal signature burned beside Ren's survival pulse. Talia's report slate slipped from her hands. Greaves stepped back from the controls. Voss closed his fingers around the rail, finally seeing his forbidden theory become public evidence. The relic had to accept the alignment: badge signal, gate signature, public feet. Cass lost through Ren's precision and Greyhound's own records, delivering cathartic vindication. The audit relic did not ask for applause. It corrected the record. Across the tournament stage ranking screen, Ren Ashford's status changed from unverified to legal survivor. The words burned brighter than his output badge ever had. For a moment, the hall saw both truths at once. The number near his collar still flickered close to zero, and the Academy's highest audit system had been forced to recognize him as alive, legal, and wronged. Cass stumbled back from the cracked floor. His top candidate badge flashed red, then split down the center. The broken pieces fell from his collar and struck the stage in front of everyone who had treated him as Greyhound's cleanest survivor. His admission line vanished from the board. His rank stripped itself number by number until no status remained but disqualified. No, Cass said, staring at the fragments. He used shadow mana. He should be illegal. The relic replayed the gate record again, louder this time. Cass's hand pressed the seal panel. The timestamp appeared beside Ren's active badge. The Academy did not need to decide whether Cass had seemed honorable. Its own emergency gate had kept the pressure of his seal. Talia Breck stepped onto the edge of the stage. Her unsigned report slate trembled in her hand. Then she turned it outward so the hall could see the false summary waiting for her signature. I was there, Talia said. Ren asked Cass to keep the gate open. Cass sealed it from outside. The rest of us let the lie protect our rewards. She erased the false witness line and submitted her statement under the audit relic. The silent candidates' clean survivor rewards vanished from the board. Their statuses shifted into review, one after another. And the hall finally saw that strategic withdrawal had become abandonment the moment Cass's seal contradicted the record. Greaves reached for the registrar controls, but the cracked death report projected above him before he touched them. His attempted stamp, the early closure order, and the suppressed abyss files unfolded in sequence. Staff stepped away from him. The cover-up did not become rumor. It became procedure exposed by procedure. Professor Voss moved as far as his watchers allowed and laid one hand against the rail. Below the relic, "You called the research contamination," he said quietly. "Your own audit just called it evidence." Ren looked toward him and understood that the notes had not merely helped him survive. They had survived with him. Voss remained watched, but his theory was no longer something Greyhound could bury without contradicting its own relic. Mira walked onto the stage and stood beside Ren before the Greyhound candidates. She did not smile at Cass. She looked at Ren first, checking the part of him the abyss had tried to steal. "You came back as yourself," she said. Ren gripped the fractured badge, "because you made that matter." Cass, stripped of rank and admission, watched the badge he worshipped lie broken at Ren's feet. Greaves lost control of the ceremony. Talia chose public testimony over protection. Voss saw his forbidden work vindicated. Mira's faith became visible proof that Ren's worth had never belonged to a magic output number. Ren did not need higher raw output to win. He preserved his anchors, exposed the gate. Forced the audit, restored his name, humiliated Cass, vindicated Mira. And ended the main revenge arc with complete resolution. Only after the ceremony ended did the foundation beneath Greyhound answer, far below the tournament stage. Below the sealed route maps and archived death reports. A black-violet registry opened in an underground archive. No student had been shown. The pages were not paper. They were layered shadows pressed into rectangular files. Each one marked with names the Academy had thought belonged only to its own records. Ren Ashford's file slid from the wall without a hand touching it. The legal victory above remained intact. The ranking screen still named him legal survivor. Cass's punishment still stood. Greaves's exposed report still circulated through official channels. Mira's vindication still held in front of the candidates. Nothing in the archive rewound that payoff, because this was not Greyhound correcting itself. This was something older noticing that Ren had refused correction. A figure behind the archive desk lifted a stamp. No face appeared beneath the hood. Only the suggestion of an examiner made from the same darkness that had trained him. The title across the desk surfaced in thin violet letters, Abyss Registrar. The registrar opened Ren's file. Inside were the preserved anchors the Umbra correction system had failed to erase. Mira's voice, the promise to return, the fear of being forgotten, the grief at the gate. The memory of Cass's betrayal. Each one had been marked resistant. Each one had allowed Ren to survive without becoming obedient. The stamp descended. Correction refused. A second line typed itself beneath the first. Recover the incomplete survivor. The file panel displayed the order in the Abyss archive, while the black-violet registry spread new. Branches under Greyhound's foundation. Above, Ren stood in the aftermath of victory. Unaware that another authority had separated his name from the Academy's records and placed it into a deeper ledger. The file did not mark Cass as unfinished, and it did not reopen Greaves's verdict. It marked only Ren, because he had survived the system without surrendering the parts it wanted removed. The revenge was complete. The next threat had only just found him, leaving fresh threat curiosity.